Hello there and welcome Scientific Serenity. Tonight we drift into a true scientific mystery. A book that has existed for over 600 years. Yet not a single human has ever read it. Its pages are filled with plants that do not exist, a language no one recognizes, and knowledge that refuses to be understood. This is not a myth. The book is real. And tonight we follow the silence of the Voynich Manuscript. This is the story of the Voynich Manuscript, and our journey begins not with an answer, but with a simple, earth-shattering act of discovery. Our tale opens in the year 1912. Europe is on the brink of cataclysm, but in a quiet corner of Italy, an antique book dealer named Wilfred Voynich is pursuing his lifelong passion, uncovering lost treasures in the libraries of old Jesuit colleges and monasteries. He was a man driven by a bibliophile's instinct, a sense that somewhere hidden in the dust lay something extraordinary. The exact location is believed to be the Villa Mondragone near Rome, a college that housed a collection of ancient texts from the suppressed Society of Jesus. The air was thick with the scent of decaying paper, aged leather, and stone. Voynich, with the patience of a hunter, sifted through chests and shelves. And then his fingers closed on a volume unlike any other. It was a small codex, about 23 by 16 centimeters, bound in a plain, unmarked vellum cover. It felt oddly light, yet dense with mystery. He opened it. The first shock was visual, page after page of bizarre, vibrant illustrations in green, blue, brown, and red. Strange plants that seemed to writhe off the page. Naked women bathing in interconnected, intricate tubes and pools. Celestial charts with spiraling stars that looked less like constellations and more like microscopic cells or galactic arms. And everywhere, flowing in a graceful, cursive hand, an alphabet of loops, curls, and characters that resembled nothing he, or any scholar he knew, had ever seen. This was no ordinary medieval herbal or astronomical treatise. This was something else, something other. Voynich, realizing the magnitude of his find, purchased the manuscript along with a bundle of other books. He brought it into the light of the modern world, where it immediately began to devour the curiosity of everyone who saw it. He sent photographs to the greatest cryptologists, linguists, and historians of his day. The initial theories were as wild as the illustrations. Was it the secret notebook of Roger Bacon? A lost Aztec codex? An elaborate Renaissance hoax? But the first and most persistent question was the most basic. How old is it? For decades, the age of the manuscript was debated based on the style of its illustrations and the cut of its vellum. It looked late medieval or early Renaissance. But looked is not proof. The shadow of a modern forgery always loomed. Could someone in the 16th or even the 19th century have created this bizarre book as an elaborate prank or a madman's project? The mystery festered until science offered a definitive tool. Radiocarbon dating.in 2009, a tiny, carefully selected sample of the manuscript's vellum, smaller than a fingernail clipping, was taken under strict supervision. The vellum, made from calfskin, held within its fibers a radioactive clock, carbon-14. By measuring the decay of this isotope, scientists could pinpoint the year the animal lived and died. The process was tense. The world watched. If the test revealed a date in the 19th or 20th century, the Voynich Manuscript would be relegated to the status of a curious, complex fake. But if it confirmed an early 15th century origin, then the mystery would deepen 1,000-fold. It would mean this book of impossible plants and unreadable text was genuinely ancient. A real artifact from a time when the world was barely charted, created by a hand that chose, or was compelled, to write in a cipher that would remain unbroken into the age of supercomputers. The results came back. The vellum was dated to between 1404 and 1438 AD, with 95% confidence. The collective intake of breath from the academic world was audible. The forgery theory, in its simplest form, evaporated. This book was real. It was contemporaneous with Joan of Arc, with the height of the Ming Dynasty, with the final years of the Byzantine Empire. It was written decades before Columbus sailed, before Gutenberg printed his Bible. The carbon test was not the end of the mystery. It was the key that locked the door tighter. Now we knew for certain. Someone 6 centuries ago invested immense time, resources, and skill, high-quality vellum, expensive pigments, meticulous draftsmanship, to create a book that was, from its inception, meant to not be understood by the casual observer. Or perhaps, it was meant to be understood only by a very specific few. Who were they? What world were they describing? And why did they bury their knowledge in a script that seems to have died with them? As we close this first chapter of discovery, imagine that moment in the lab. A scientist holds a sliver of ancient skin that once breathed on an Italian hillside. That skin now tells us a number, 1404 to 1438. But it gives no answers, only a more profound question mark hanging in the silent air. We have established the when. The journey to uncover the who, why, and what has only just begun. The carbon date was a seismic fact, but facts are only the foundation. Now we must examine the physical artifact itself. The book is an object. For in its parchment, its ink, its binding, and its very craftsmanship lie silent clues to its origin and purpose. To hold the Voynich Manuscript, though few ever do, is to hold a paradox. It is both profoundly ordinary and utterly alien. Let's begin with its body, the vellum. The carbon test told us when the calves lived, but the vellum itself speaks of deliberate choice. In the early 15th century, paper was increasingly available and cheaper, especially in Italy. Yet the creator of this book chose vellum, animal skin, more durable, more expensive, and associated with works of lasting importance. Bibles, legal charters, royal decrees. This was not a casual notebook. It was intended to endure. The book is small, portable, comprising about 240 remaining pages. Some are missing, folded into quires and sewn together. The pages are filled from edge to edge, with text flowing around the intricate illustrations in a way that suggests the text and images were planned together, created in concert. This is not a case of pictures added to blank spaces later. The integration is seamless, intimate. Then there are the inks and pigments. Under ultraviolet and microscopic analysis, they reveal themselves to be consistent with early 15th century European materials. The rich greens are from malachite or verdigris, the blues likely from azurite, the reds from red lead or vermilion. There is no evidence of modern synthetic dyes. The inks, both the carbon-based black for text and the colored paints, were applied with skill. The draftsmanship, while strange in content, is confident, fluid, and detailed. The hand that drew these unearthly plants knew how to render form and shadow. This was the work of a trained illustrator, perhaps a monastic scribe or a court artist, not an amateur doodler. But here, amidst the conventional materials, we find the first deep peculiarity, the script. Now that we know the book is genuinely old, the writing becomes an even more profound puzzle. It is written left to right with clear word breaks. Statistical analysis, the same kind used to identify natural language, shows it has a structure eerily similar to real human language. There is a word-length distribution that matches known tongues. Certain characters appear mostly at the beginnings of words, others at the ends, a feature of alphabetic systems with prefixes and suffixes. It obeys Zipf's law, a linguistic principle where the most common words in a language appear with predictable frequency. The text, in other words, behaves like language. It is almost certainly not random gibberish. Yet, for over a century, the world's best code breakers, including teams from both world wars who cracked military ciphers, have thrown themselves at it and failed. The famous cryptanalyst William Friedman, who helped break Japan's Purple Code, devoted his later years to the Voynich without success. Modern supercomputers running brute force decryption algorithms and AI pattern recognition have found no key, no substitution cipher, no anagrammatic solution that yields a coherent message in any known language. This presents us with a chilling possibility. We are not looking at a cipher of a known language, like English encoded with symbols. We may be looking at a script for a lost language. Or worse, a constructed language, an entirely invented linguistic system. If so, the Voynich is not a book to be decoded in the traditional sense. It is a book to be learned, and the only textbook for that language may be the book itself. The Rosetta Stone for this language, if it ever existed, is dust. Soundscape shifts subtly. The turning pages are joined by the faint rhythmic tapping of a 1910s typewriter, morphing into the rapid digital clicking of a modern keyboard, a sonic metaphor for centuries of failed decryption attempts. Alongside the text are the now famous illustrations, which we will explore in depth in later chapters. But even a surface glance reveals their disturbing nature. The book is divided into sections, seemingly by subject: herbal, astronomical, biological, cosmological, and pharmaceutical. The herbal section, the largest, is what first strikes the viewer. Page after page of lush, painted plants. But as botanists have noted since the 1920s, they are composite plants. A root system from one species, leaves from another, flowers from a third. Some have morphological impossibilities, leaves growing directly from flower petals, stems that bifurcate in ways unknown to botany. They are plant-like but not plants. They are fantasies with the precise detail of scientific observation. This combination, meticulous, expensive physical creation, linguistically structured but unreadable text and meticulously rendered impossible images, is the heart of the shock delivered by the carbon date. The date proves the mystery is not a modern confection. It is an antique mystery crafted with purpose and care at the dawn of the Renaissance, a time when Europe was rediscovering ancient knowledge and daring to explore new worlds. Who commissioned it? Who had the wealth for such vellum and pigment? Who had the need for such profound secrecy? The usual suspects: a wealthy patron, a secret society, a lone genius. All seem inadequate. The effort is too great, the payoff too obscure. As you contemplate the physical reality of this book, imagine the scribe in a sunlit scriptorium, a pot of azurite blue at his elbow, carefully painting the veins on a leaf that never grew on God's earth. What was in his mind? Was he copying from a now-lost source even stranger than his copy? Was he translating a vision into the only script he dared use? Or was he, as some darker theories suggest, recording something he had witnessed that existed outside the normal boundaries of the 15th century world? The carbon test gave us an anchor in time. But instead of tethering the manuscript to our understanding, it has set the mystery adrift in a much deeper, much older sea. We stand now at the threshold of the true enigma. The carbon date is a fixed star in our investigation, a point of undeniable truth in a firmament of speculation. But like any fixed point, it also reveals the vast, uncharted space around it. The year 1404 to 1438 is not just a date. It is a portal into a specific moment in human history, a moment that makes the Voynich Manuscript not just strange, but anachronistically strange. Consider the world of the early 1400s. In Europe, the medieval worldview still holds, but it is beginning to crack. The first whispers of the Renaissance stir in Italy. The known world is a map with vast blank spaces labeled, "Here be dragons." Knowledge is guarded, often allegorical, preserved in monasteries and royal courts. Yet even in this context, the Voynich is an outlier. What other works were being created in those same decades? The trace riches Ars du Duc de Berry, 1412 to 1416. A book of hours with stunningly realistic depictions of court life and the seasons. The works of Jan van Eyck, pioneering oil painting with divine attention to the physical world. These are masterpieces rooted in observation, in the glorification of God's known creation. The Voynich Manuscript does the opposite. It meticulously documents a creation that is not known. It employs the emerging tools of realistic illustration not to depict reality, but to depict a coherent unreality. This is not the doodling of a bored monk in a margin. This is a systematic, comprehensive project. It has the structure of a scholarly reference work. a pharmacopoeia, an herbal and astronomical guide, but its content is from no recognizable scholarly tradition. This brings us to the most haunting implication of the carbon date: the author's intent. If this were a modern forgery, the intent would be simple: to deceive, to gain fame or money. But a 15th century creator had no YouTube to fame, no wealthy collector like Voynich to fool. The cost in time, materials, and skill was immense. So what was the reward? Theory 1. The secret knowledge hypothesis. The book records genuine, powerful knowledge, alchemical, heretical, or magical, in a cipher to protect it from the church or rival scholars. The impossible plants could be allegorical representations of chemical processes or spiritual states. The bathing nymphs could symbolize distillation or spiritual purification. This fits the era's love of allegory and secrecy. Theory 2. The medical treatise hypothesis. Perhaps the plants are not literal, but schematic diagrams of their medicinal properties, not their appearance. The strange writing could be a coded shorthand for recipes and dosages, meant to be understood only by a guild of healers. The nude figures could represent humoral balances or diagnostic charts. Theory 3. The linguistic experiment hypothesis. Could it be the work of a brilliant, lonely polymath like Ramon Llull or Roger Bacon, attempting to create a perfect philosophical language, a lingua adamica, to directly express the essence of things, free from the confusion of human tongues? The images would then be the reference for this new language's first dictionary. Theory 4. The outsider art hypothesis. The product of a mind unmoored from consensus reality, yet gifted with a draftsman's hand. A medieval patient in what we would now call a prolonged, articulate psychotic or visionary state, recording their inner cosmos with the only tools they had. Theory 5. The most radical theory. The carbon date proves it's old. The content proves it's unlike anything else from its time. Could it be a copy of a much older, lost source? Or could it be, as some fringe researchers suggest, a record of something seen but not of this world, filtered through a medieval artistic lens? This theory is the least provable, but it persists because it addresses the core weirdness. The feeling that we are not looking at imagination but at reportage of the alien. The carbon test silenced the easy skeptics. It forced us to take the mystery seriously on its own 15th century terms. We can no longer dismiss it as a silly modern fake. We must grapple with the fact that someone in the age of parchment and quill chose to spend years of their life creating this beautiful, frustrating, and silent testament. As this first chapter closes, we are left not with a solution, but with a profound shift in perspective. The Voynich Manuscript is no longer a maybe. It is a what is this? From the past, a message in a bottle washed up on our modern shore, the bottle itself dated, but the message still sealed. Our journey ahead will delve into the specifics of its bewildering pages. The alien botany, the celestial spirals, the nymphs, and the unbreakable code. But always in the background will be the silent, sobering fact of that carbon date, 1404 to 1438. A reminder that our history is perhaps not as fully known as we believe, and that the human drive to record, to communicate, and to conceal can produce artifacts that outlast every attempt to understand them. We now turn to the heart of the Voynich Manuscript, to the section that first captivates and confounds every viewer, the herbal. If the carbon date anchored the book in history, these pages immediately attempt to pull it free again. Here, in vibrant color and meticulous detail, lies a garden from a dream or a nightmare. This is not a collection of medicinal herbs from an Italian hillside or an alpine meadow. This is a flora of elsewhere. The herbal section comprises over 130 full-page illustrations of plants. To the untrained eye, they are simply beautiful, strange medieval art. But to a botanist, they are a sustained cognitive dissonance. They are drawn with the precise techniques of a skilled botanical illustrator. Roots are shown, stems are cross-sectioned, leaves display venation patterns, flowers are dissected to show reproductive parts. The artist knew how plants should be drawn for scientific study. And then he or she used that skill to draw plants that could not be. Let us examine a famous example, often called Voynich Plant 1R, the first plant in the manuscript. It has a thick, tuberous root, not unlike a beet or a mandrake. But from this root rises a slender, smooth stem that branches in a perfect, symmetrical, fractal-like pattern, each branch culminating in a single, complex flower. The leaves are smooth, oval, and attached directly to the stem in a whorled pattern that is botanically rare. The flower itself is a nightmare for a taxonomist. It has multiple layers of petals that seem to fuse at the base into a tubular structure, from which emerge what look like both stamens and tiny secondary leaf-like growths. No known Asteraceae, Rosaceae, or any other plant family on Earth exhibits this precise combination of features. This is the pattern page after page. Composite botany. A root system suggestive of one family, perhaps Apiaceae for its taproots. Leaves reminiscent of another, the simple, entire margins of the Lauraceae. And reproductive structures, flowers, seed pods, that belong to a third, or to no family at all. Some plants have leaves growing directly from the petals. Others have stems that split and refuse in impossible grafts. Some show fruits that are half berry, half cone. Modern botanists who have attempted systematic analysis, like the late Dr. Arthur Tucker, have sometimes proposed tentative, fragmentary identifications with New World plants, like a viola or a helianthus, suggesting the artist might have seen sketches from early, unrecorded transatlantic contact. But these identifications are always partial and hotly debated. A single leaf might resemble something, but the whole plant never does. It's as if the artist had access to a messy, fragmented sketchbook of plant parts from across the globe and assembled them at random. But randomness is not the feeling one gets. The feeling is one of intentional hybridity. These plants look designed. They have an internal logic, a biomechanical plausibility that pure fantasy often lacks. Their strangeness is systematic. What could this mean? Several hypotheses rise from the page, each as intriguing as the plants themselves. Hypothesis 1. The Encrypted Practical Guide. Perhaps these are not literal plants but coded diagrams. Each plant is a schematic for a chemical recipe, an alchemical process, or a medical procedure. The root represents the base ingredient, the stem the process of distillation or refinement, the leaves auxiliary ingredients, the flower the final product. The entire herbal would then be a visual codex for pharmacy or alchemy, its meaning locked away from the uninitiated. Hypothesis 2. The Philosophical Herbal. In medieval and Renaissance thought, the microcosm, man, reflected the macrocosm, the universe. Plants were also part of this symbolic chain. A plant in a philosophical text might represent a spiritual concept, a stage of enlightenment, or a planetary influence. The Voynich plants, with their impossible combinations, could be visual metaphors for complex philosophical or theological syntheses. Hypothesis 3. The Visionary Record. What if the artist was depicting flora seen in visions, dreams, or altered states of consciousness? The consistency across pages suggests a coherent inner world, a xenobotany of the mind, meticulously recorded as one would record a newly discovered continent. Hypothesis 4. The Lost Ecosystem. The most tantalizing and radical idea. Could these be stylized but real records of a flora that is now extinct? Or from a land so isolated it was never documented by mainstream science? A lost valley, a remote island whose ecosystem was annihilated by disease or climate shift shortly after being recorded by a lone, stranded traveler? As we gaze upon these impossible leaves and flowers, we are not just looking at pretty pictures. We are facing a fundamental question about the nature of the manuscript. Is it a work of encryption, symbolism, psychosis, or revelation? The botanical section, with its maddening blend of scientific rigor and biological impossibility, is the first major argument that the Voynich is more than a simple cipher. It is a world-building project. To understand the depth of the puzzle, we must look closer, not just at the plants as wholes, but at their anatomical parts, their presentation, and their unsettling relationship with the text that cradles them. For in the Voynich, image and word are partners in mystery, each deepening the strangeness of the other. First, consider the presentation style. Each plant typically occupies a full page. It is drawn with a clean, bold outline, then filled with washes of color. There is a striking lack of background or context. No soil horizon, no other plants, no insects, no landscape. The plant exists in a void. This isolation is a standard feature of medieval herbals, meant to focus the viewer on the specimen for identification. Yet, in a normal herbal, this isolation helps you recognize the plant. Here, it only heightens the sensation of examining a specimen from an unknown realm, pinned to the page like an alien butterfly. The coloring, while faded, reveals a deliberate palette. Greens dominate, but they are often tinged with blues or browns that feel unearthly. Some roots are a stark, bloody red. Some flowers glow with a luminous yellow that seems to imply bioluminescence. The artist wasn't just filling space. They were conveying properties, perhaps medicinal, perhaps symbolic, perhaps simply observed. Now, observe the structural impossibilities more technically. Botanists note several recurring errors that defy known plant physiology. Vasculature anomalies. In many plants, the veins in the leaves do not follow the typical dendritic, tree-like, or parallel patterns of terrestrial plants. They sometimes form perfect geometric networks, grids or concentric circles, more akin to the veins in an insect's wing or a circuit board. Phyllotaxy breaks. The arrangement of leaves on a stem, phyllotaxy, follows strict mathematical patterns in nature: alternate, opposite, whorled. Voynich plants often break these rules mid-stem, switching from one pattern to another, or displaying spirals with Fibonacci ratios that suddenly distort. Reproductive chaos. Flowers and fruits are the most reliable features for identifying plants. Here they are the most fantastical. Stamens emerge from petals. Ovaries appear to be located on leaf surfaces. Some fruits are depicted as hollow, pod-like structures with smaller, fully formed secondary plants visible inside. A visual metaphor for germination, perhaps, but not a realistic depiction of any known seed pod. This leads to the critical connection: the text. The writing flows around the plants, often in blocks or paragraphs that seem to label parts. It is common in herbals for text to name the plant, list its virtues, medicinal uses, and describe its parts. Does the Voynich text do this? We cannot read it, but the placement of text is suggestive. Dense paragraphs often cluster near the root or the flower, precisely where a medieval herbal would discuss the most potent parts of the plant. Shorter, repeated words or phrases sometimes run along stems or point to specific leaves like labels. This structure has led linguists to perform a fascinating analysis. They treat the manuscript as a potential picture dictionary. They assume that a word appearing next to a root on many pages might mean root. A word by a flower might mean flower, petal, or to heal. Using this statistical approach, they have tentatively identified what they call root words and flower words. But without a single deciphered sentence, this remains a probabilistic ghost, a shape of meaning we can sense but not grasp. The botany section also contains what appear to be compound pages, illustrations showing multiple plant parts disassembled. One page might show a series of roots of different shapes, detached and lined up like tools. Another might show an array of leaves. This reinforces the idea of a systematic work. It is not a haphazard collection of pretty pictures. It is organized, almost clinical in its presentation of this alien flora. Feels like a reference manual for a practicing something. An herbalist of the impossible. A pharmacist of the unreal. Soundscape subtly incorporates the sound of gentle wind through strange foliage, and the faint, metallic ping of a scientist's tool tapping a specimen jar. The page turning continues, but now it's the crisp turn of a modern researcher's notepad. What could possibly be the purpose of such a meticulous, systematic, yet biologically impossible herbal? The medical theory gained some traction here. Medieval and Renaissance medicine was deeply symbolic. The doctrine of signatures held that plants advertised their healing purposes through their shapes: a walnut for the brain, a lungwort leaf for pulmonary disease. Perhaps the Voynich plants are extreme extensions of this idea. Their impossible forms are signatures for complex, multi-symptom diseases or spiritual ailments no simple plant could cure. Or perhaps the purpose was mnemonic. The bizarre, striking images are unforgettable. If each plant is a cipher for a specific, lengthy piece of information, a chemical formula, a ritual, a chapter of secret knowledge, then the unforgettable image would serve as a perfect memory trigger for the initiated who knew the key. The text would then be the detailed elaboration, readable only to those who had memorized the visual cipher. As we sit with these images, we move beyond simple confusion to a kind of awe. The impossible botany is not a failure of the artist's skill. It is a triumph of their intent. They successfully created a complete, self-consistent, and visually compelling botanical system that has resisted integration into our understanding of the natural world for 6 centuries. It is a closed loop. The images explain nothing without the text, and the text is locked away by the images. We are left in the position of an archaeologist from the far future, unearthing a smartphone. We can see it is a sophisticated object, full of intentional structure. We can analyze its materials, its icons, its layout. But without the operating system, without the key to its language, it remains a beautiful, baffling artifact. The Voynich herbal is a smartphone from 1420, its screen glowing with icons for apps we can never open. We have wandered through this silent, impossible garden. We have noted its scientific precision and its biological heresies. But a garden does not exist in a vacuum. It is planted by someone for some reason. As we prepare to leave the herbal section and venture deeper into the manuscript's other wonders, we must ask the culminating question: what does this impossible botany ultimately tell us about the Voynich manuscript as a whole? The answer, perhaps, is that it defines the central paradox of the entire work: the marriage of extreme order and profound obscurity. Every page of the herbal screams intention. The uniformity of style, the repetition of illustrative conventions, the careful pairing of text and image, all point to a grand, organized project. This was not a doodle or a casual diary. It was a compilation, likely requiring a patron's wealth, a scholar's direction, and an artist's skilled hand over many months or years. It has the weight of purpose. Yet, that very purpose is what is so thoroughly hidden from us. The order is not a ladder to understanding. It is a labyrinth designed to keep understanding in. The plants are drawn with the clarity of a textbook, but they are textbooks for a class no one on earth seems to have taken. This paradox forces us to reconsider the nature of this secret the manuscript might contain. If it were a simple secret, a recipe for gold, a map to treasure, a heretical prayer, would it require such an elaborate, massive, and unique veil? Probably not. Lesser ciphers and symbolic illustrations were used for such things throughout history. The scale and artistry of the Voynich suggest its secret is of a different magnitude. Perhaps it is not a single secret, but an entire system of knowledge that needed to be preserved in a way that was both enduring and utterly concealed from the dominant intellectual powers of its day, be it the church, rival universities, or the uninitiated masses. The impossible botany then becomes the first layer of this system, a visual and conceptual filter. Only someone who understood the symbolic language of these plants could even begin to approach the text. This brings us to the most haunting possibility of all. What if the plants are not impossible? What if they are, in fact, accurate? Not accurate to our Earth, but accurate to a different frame of reference. We have assumed the frame of reference is terrestrial botany. But what if it's not? What if the frame is alchemical botany, where plants represent stages of chemical transformation, their roots the prima materia, their stems the process, their flowers the philosopher's stone? Astrological botany, where each plant is a cipher for the influence of a star or constellation on earthly matter, its form depicting that celestial energy's manifestation. Microscopic or cellular botany, a staggering anachronism. What if the images are wildly stylized but inspired by glimpses through an early lost form of lens, depicting the cellular structure of plants magnified and misinterpreted? Extraterrestrial or otherworldly botany, the simplest yet most mind-bending explanation. They are records, however stylized, of a non-terrestrial biology. This is the least likely by our standard historical models, but it is the only one that resolves the core complaint of botanists. This looks like a real plant, but from no family we know. The herbal section, therefore, acts as the manuscript's thesis statement. It announces, "The world you know is not the only world. Here is a system of life that operates on different principles. To understand it, you must learn a new language." As we close this chapter on the plants, let their silence speak. They do not look like random fantasy. They look discovered. There is a weight of observation in them. This quality is what has fueled centuries of obsession. It's not just that we can't read the words, it's that we feel we should recognize the plants and we don't. It's a tease from history, a poke in the eye of our confident, catalogued world. Our journey now turns from the rooted and growing to the cosmic and flowing. We will leave the garden and look up to the stars, and down into the intricate baths and tubes where the famous nymphs reside. But the lesson of the botany will follow us. In the Voynich Manuscript, nothing is merely decorative. Everything is part of a system. A system whose key was thrown away, lost, or perhaps never existed in a form we would recognize. The impossible botany is the foundation. It tells us the author was building a world. Our task is to figure out if that world was inside their mind, a hidden layer of our own, or a message from a place we have never been. We now turn the page from the rooted silence of the herbal garden into the most dynamic and puzzling sections of the Voynich Manuscript. Here, stillness gives way to motion, vegetation gives way to cosmos and biology. we enter the realms of the astronomical or cosmological folios and the infamous biological or balneological section, home to the mysterious nude figures, the nymphs. If the plants felt like specimens from a lost world, these pages feel like diagrams of its very functions, its stars, its waters, and its inhabitants. Let's first look skyward at the celestial maps. These are not star charts as we know them. You will not find Ursa Major or Orion here. Instead, you find pages dominated by large, intricate circular diagrams. They look like radiant suns or perhaps schematic cells, bursting with symmetry. The most famous is often called the rosettes, a breathtaking fold-out page depicting 9 interconnected metal-like circular structures, each intricately decorated with what appear to be castle towers, piping, and tiny, unreadable text. It resembles an architectural plan for a celestial city more than a map of the heavens. Other pages show concentric circles filled with stars, not the 5-pointed stars of medieval art, but small, precise dots, often arranged in clusters or along curved bands that resemble zodiacal paths. Some circles are divided into pie-slice segments, each containing a single sign of the zodiac, a small, conventional drawing of an archer, a pair of fish, etc. But these familiar symbols are anchored in a sea of utterly unfamiliar imagery. The bands connecting them are populated by tiny, naked female figures, each holding a star. The cosmos here is not cold and distant. It is intimate, female, and flowing. This leads us directly to the other great visual shock of the manuscript, the nymphs. Dozens of pages are filled with illustrations of small, nude female figures, some alone, some in groups, engaged in enigmatic activities around and within elaborate systems of pools, baths, and interconnecting tubes or ducts. The tubes are often transparent, showing a flow of liquid, or perhaps something else. The figures appear to be bathing, swimming, interacting with the tubes, or sometimes simply standing in connection points where tubes meet. They are drawn with a naive, almost diagrammatic simplicity, yet their poses are fluid and natural. They are not eroticized in the classical sense. They are functional. They look like components in a system. Some seem to be holding objects, perhaps stars or orbs. Others are connected to the tubes by a kind of umbilical link. The overall impression is less like a scene from a bathhouse and more like a cross-section of a living organism, with the nymphs representing what? Cells? Organs? Spiritual energies? Alchemical principles? The connection between the celestial circles and the biological diagrams is profound and likely intentional. In the pre-modern worldview, the cosmos, macrocosm, and the human body, microcosm, were reflections of each other. The same forces that moved the stars governed the fluids of the body. The Voynich Manuscript seems to be illustrating this principle with a literalness that is both bizarre and brilliant. The tubes in the biological section mirror the connecting bands in the cosmological circles. The nymphs holding stars in the sky are mirrored by the nymphs in the baths. It is a unified system. So what system is it? Hypothesis 1. astrological medicine. This is the most academically supported theory for these sections. Medieval and Renaissance medicine was deeply tied to astrology. The position of stars and planets was thought to influence the body's four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile. Treatment often involved baths, balneology, at astrologically auspicious times. The Voynich could be an advanced, encrypted guide to astrological balneology. The circular diagrams might be complex horoscopes or talismanic charts for timing treatments. The nymphs in the tubes could represent the humors or vital spirits being purified and rebalanced through hydrotherapy guided by the stars. Hypothesis 2. Alchemical allegory. Alchemy was rife with symbolic imagery. The philosopher's stone was often described as a process of purification and union, depicted as a royal marriage or a bath. The nymphs could represent prima materia, base matter, being washed and transformed in the bath of the philosophers. The interconnected tubes would be the vessels and alembics of distillation. The celestial maps would represent the heavenly or spiritual forces needed to guide the chemical process. Hypothesis 3. A mystical or visionary anatomy. Could this be a map of the subtle body from a forgotten mystical tradition? The tubes could be nadis, energy channels, from tantric yoga, the pools chakras, and the nymphs the awakened energies, kundalini, moving through them. The celestial maps would then be the corresponding spiritual cosmos. This would make the Voynich a rare European parallel to Eastern esoteric diagrams. Hypothesis 4. A literal but misunderstood scientific diagram. The most provocative idea. What if the tubes and pools are just that, tubes and pools? Could they represent a real, complex hydraulic system for something like a spa, a laboratory, or an irrigation system? And the nymphs are simply schematic representations of people using it? The celestial maps could then be decorative or symbolic overlays. This feels almost too mundane for the Voynich, but its sheer oddness forces us to consider all possibilities. As we stand at the intersection of these starry wheels and watery ducts, we are no longer looking at a simple puzzle. We are looking at a model of a universe where astronomy, hydrology, and biology are not separate sciences, but interconnected flows of the same essential substance. The Voynich author wasn't just recording secrets. They were drawing a blueprint of reality as they understood, or believed, it to be. To truly feel the weight of this mystery, we must zoom in. The devil, and the possible divinity, of the Voynich is in these details. Let's dissect one of the most famous biological pages, often called the Bath, or Folio 78R. The page is dominated by an elaborate, centralized pool shaped like a medieval fortress battlement or a complex flower. From this central pool, a network of clear pipe-like tubes radiate outward, connecting to smaller satellite pools. In these pools, and sometimes within the tubes themselves, are the nymphs. Some are submerged up to their waists, others float on their backs, others stand as if waiting. A few appear to be holding onto the tubes or even crawling through them. Their expressions are placid, neutral. There is no sense of distress or revelry, only purposeful immersion. Now observe the fluids. Most tubes contain a liquid rendered by a pattern of parallel lines suggesting flow. In some, the fluid is dotted with tiny star-like shapes. In others, it appears to contain bubbles or particulate matter. The coloring is consistent, a pale blue or green wash. This is not chaotic splashing. It is a diagram of circulation. The central pool acts as a heart or a reservoir, the tubes as arteries and veins, the nymphs as perhaps the blood cells or the spiritual essence being circulated. This imagery is shockingly reminiscent of two things that, in the 15th century, should not have been conceptually linked with such clarity: the human circulatory system. William Harvey wouldn't describe blood circulation until 1628. Yet here, centuries earlier, is a vivid schematic of a closed hydraulic system with a central pump and branching vessels. Industrial or chemical plumbing. The intricate network of pipes and vessels looks like the distillation apparatus of an alchemist or an early chemical engineer, designed to separate, purify, and recombine substances. This visual duality is the core of the section's power. It feels both biological and technological, organic and engineered. Now lift your gaze to the celestial diagrams. Take the famous zodiac pages. Each sign is represented in a circular band populated by tiny nymphs, each holding a star. The nymphs are often arranged in groups of 7 or 30, numbers significant in lunar and calendrical cycles. The bands themselves are connected by pathways, creating a web. It doesn't map onto the actual ecliptic. Instead, it seems to map a relationship between celestial sectors, mediated by these star-bearing female figures. The most compelling interpretation is that these are astrological sympathy maps. They don't show where stars are, but how their influences connect and flow into each other and ultimately down into the terrestrial or bodily realm represented by the bath pages. The nymphs are the personified carriers of this astral influence. They are the demons of the stars, the intermediate spirits of Neoplatonic thought, bringing cosmic power into the material world. This creates a breathtaking, if baffling, holistic vision. The herbal section shows the strange material forms, plants, that result from these cosmic terrestrial interactions. The cosmological section shows the celestial mechanics of the influencing forces. The biological section shows the process of those forces being channeled, mixed, and purified in a fluid medium, whether that medium is bath water, bodily humors, or the alchemical aqua vitae. The text, of course, flows through all of it. In the bath pages, paragraphs of the mysterious script often run along the edges of the pools or next to the tubes, like labels or instructions. On the zodiac pages, it fills the spaces between the circles. The writing is an integral part of the diagrammatic system. It is the operating manual. Soundscape evolves. The ticking and flowing are joined by a low melodic hum, like a choir of women singing a single sustained note from a great distance. It is neither happy nor sad. It is functional, like the sound of a working engine. Pages turn, but now they are heavy parchment, and the turning is slow, reverent. Why the persistent, exclusive use of female figures? In the context of the time, this is itself a radical choice. Medieval science and astronomy were overwhelmingly masculine in their symbolism: God the Father, the King's Son, the rational mind. The Voynich cosmos is feminine, fluid, communal, and embodied. This has led some scholars to speculate about a possible link to suppressed women's knowledge, perhaps a midwifery or gynecological text, encrypted for protection. The tubes could represent fallopian tubes, the pools the uterus, the stars ova. The entire manuscript could be a coded compendium of reproductive and herbal medicine, guarded from the male-dominated medical and religious authorities. Others see it as a hallmark of a particular esoteric tradition, one that revered the divine feminine, the Sophia, wisdom, or the anima mundi, world soul, as the active principle in the cosmos. The manuscript would then be a sacred text of that tradition. As we immerse ourselves in these flowing, starry pages, we move beyond mere curiosity into a kind of archaeological vertigo. We are not just looking at a puzzle. We are looking at the complete inner world of a lost intellectual tradition. It is a world that seems to have understood the universe as a single living hydraulic organism, powered by stellar influences and manifested in strange flora and fluid processes. It is a worldview that is entirely alien to the mechanistic hierarchical cosmos that would come to dominate Western thought after Newton. The Voynich Manuscript, in these central sections, appears less like a book of secrets and more like a survivor. A single, beautiful, baffling survivor of a way of thinking that was perhaps systematically erased, or that simply faded away because its language, both visual and literal, could not be translated into the new tongues of power and science. We are left with the haunting impression that we are not failing to break a code. We are failing to hear a frequency. The manuscript is broadcasting on a wavelength of thought we have long since tuned out. We have navigated the star-charted flows and the nymph-filled ducts. We have seen a cosmos that is alive, fluid, and feminine, a stark contrast to the clockwork universe that would later emerge from the scientific revolution. As we prepare to leave this section, we must confront the most profound question it raises. What was the use of such an elaborate, integrated model? Was it meant to be contemplated or operated? The combination of celestial maps and biological diagrams suggests a profoundly practical intent, albeit a practicality from a worldview we no longer share. This was likely not a work of pure philosophy or art for art's sake. The precise diagrams, the schematic nymphs, the labeling text, all point toward a guide for action. Consider the possibility in its fullest form. The diagnosis: a practitioner, an astrological physician, an alchemist, or a wise woman would consult the celestial rosettes. By understanding the current alignment of influences, mapped by the zodiac circles and star nymphs, they would diagnose an imbalance in the microcosm, a patient's body, a substance, or perhaps a piece of land. The prescription: they would then turn to the bath pages. These would not be literal pictures of a bathhouse, but symbolic recipes for treatment. The specific arrangement of nymphs in tubes, the connections between pools, the flow directions indicated by the liquid lines, all would encode a specific therapeutic or alchemical procedure. Perhaps nymph A in pool X connected to nymph B in tube Y meant mix ingredient A with substance B under a specific planetary hour. The ingredient, the resulting balanced fluid or essence, would then correspond to one of the impossible plants from the herbal section, which would be harvested, or more likely, its symbolic properties invoked, to complete the cure or the transformation. In this reading, the Voynich Manuscript is a complete, self-contained technological manual. Its technology is not one of gears and levers, but of sympathies, correspondences, and spiritual hydraulics. It is a machine for interacting with a universe perceived as animate and interconnected. The text is the critical software, the incantations, the measurements, the precise verbal formulas that activate the visual symbols. This explains why it has been so impossible to crack. We are not looking for a simple substitution cipher where X equals A. We are trying to reconstruct an entire lost science from its schematic diagrams without understanding its fundamental axioms. It's like finding the wiring diagram for a USB-C cable in a world that has only just invented the wheel. You can see the patterns, but the purpose and the power source are utter mysteries. This brings us to the poignant fate of the nymphs. In our modern world, stripped of their original symbolic meaning, they have often been misinterpreted as whimsical or even voyeuristic. But in their original context, they were likely as technical and functional as a diagram of a pump's piston or a circuit's resistor. They were components in a logical system. Their nakedness probably signified purity, essence, or a state of being unadorned by secondary qualities, ready to receive and transmit influence. The tragedy and the allure of the Voynich is that this system, whatever it was, failed to make the transition into the age of print and widespread scholarship. It remained a singleton, a dead end. Perhaps its guardians died without passing on the oral key. Perhaps the worldview it represented was actively suppressed. Or perhaps the system itself was found to be not useful in a changing world. The manuscript then became a beautiful relic, a locked chest whose key was melted down for other metals. As we close this chapter on the maps and the nymphs, let their silent, purposeful activity linger in your mind. They are not random. They are engaged in a great, slow work, the work of circulating celestial virtue, of balancing cosmic humors, of transforming base matter into something refined. They are the workers in a factory of meaning whose product we can no longer name. Our journey now must descend from these cosmic and biological schematics to the very fabric of the mystery, the script itself. We must confront the language of no one. For if the images are the engine of this lost machine, the text is the fuel. And we have not yet found the match to light it. We have admired the manuscript's strange beauty and puzzled over its bizarre imagery. But now we come to the core of the core, the fortress at the heart of the mystery, the writing itself, the Voynich script. This is the barrier that has turned away kings, scholars, soldiers, and machines. It is not merely a cipher to be solved. It is a language to be discovered or an illusion to be debunked. This is the story of the century-long war to read the unreadable. First, let us describe the enemy. The Voynich script is an alphabet of between 23 and 40 distinct characters, depending on how one counts subtle variations. Some look like familiar Latin letters gone slightly wrong. C, O, Ugh. Others are unique. Loops like figure eights, gallows-like characters, curling tails. It is written left to right, with clear spaces between what appear to be words. The handwriting is fluent, consistent, and suggests a trained scribe comfortable with the script. It is not the hesitant scrawl of someone inventing as they go. From the very beginning, this fluency presented a critical clue. This looks like a real written language. The words are not random strings. They have structure. Short words abound. Certain characters appear almost exclusively at the beginnings of words, others at the ends, a property known as positional bias, common in real alphabets. The text obeys Zipf's law, a statistical rule of human language where the most frequent word occurs roughly twice as often as the second most frequent, 3 times as often as the third, and so on. The Voynich text follows this law beautifully. Gibberish typically does not. This statistical fingerprint has been both the great hope and the great torment of researchers. It screams, "I am meaningful," while whispering nothing of what that meaning is. The initial attacks came from the world of classical cryptanalysis. The great codebreakers of the world wars, men like William and Elizabeth Friedman, who helped break Japanese and German codes, turned their formidable minds to the Voynich. They assumed it was a cipher, a known European language, Latin, Italian, German, disguised by letter substitution or transposition. They tried everything. Simple substitution, polyalphabetic ciphers, homophonic ciphers, even complex book ciphers where the key is a specific passage from another known text. They all failed. The text resisted every classic code-breaking technique. Word patterns didn't match any known language when decrypted. The entropy, measure of randomness, was wrong for a simple cipher. The manuscript seemed to be either an unbreakably complex cipher for its time, which seems unlikely, or something else entirely. Soundscape shifts. The server farm hum dips, replaced by the softer, more analog sounds of a mid-20th century university office. The squeak of a chalkboard, the rustle of index cards, the murmur of scholarly debate. This led to the rise of the linguistic hypothesis. Perhaps it wasn't a cipher, but a script for a natural language that is extinct or unknown. Perhaps it records a rare vernacular, a dying dialect, or an intentionally constructed language, a linguistic philosophical like those dreamed of in the Renaissance. This hypothesis gained traction with the discovery of the courier languages. In the 1970s, cryptanalyst John H. Tiltman and later Captain Prescott Currier made a crucial observation. The manuscript seems to be written in 2 distinct languages, or dialects, now called Courier A and Courier B. They have different statistical profiles, different favorite letters, different word lengths. Courier appears more in the herbal and biological sections. Courier B dominates the cosmological and pharmaceutical parts. This suggests either two scribes with different habits, or two related but distinct linguistic registers for different subjects, like the difference between poetic and technical language. This was a bombshell. It meant the text had internal structure beyond mere repetition. It behaved like a real, functional writing system being used for different purposes. Yet, the central wall remained. No proposed source language, whether a disguised Hebrew, a coded Ukrainian, an abbreviated Latin, or a lost Aztec language, has provided a convincing, consistent translation that makes sense of the images. Proposed solutions pop up every few years, claiming to have cracked it, only to be dismantled by the community. They often produce fragmented, anagram-like phrases that could be forced to fit, but never the flowing, coherent text the manuscript statistics imply. The failure of human cryptographers opened the door to a new kind of challenger, the machine. The 21st century brought a new army to the walls of the Voynich fortress. Algorithms, artificial intelligence, and vast computational power. If human pattern recognition had failed, perhaps machine learning, designed to find patterns invisible to the eye, could succeed. This chapter became a battle not just of intellect, but of processing power. The first major computational forays used statistical natural language processing, NLP. Researchers fed the Voynich text into programs designed to analyze linguistic structures. The results were tantalizing and frustrating in equal measure. The algorithms confirmed the human observations with cold, digital certainty. The text has a word entropy and character distribution nearly identical to that of natural languages like Latin or English. Its syllable structure is consistent. It even shows evidence of morphology, the modification of words to express grammatical function, like adding ed for past tense or s for plural. The computer could identify what looked like root words and suffixes, a property called agglutination. For example, a common root might appear as the first few characters of a word, with different tails appended. This was monumental. It strongly suggested the text was not a meaningless hoax, but a constructed system with grammatical rules. A hoaxer from the 15th century would have needed an understanding of linguistic statistics centuries ahead of their time to forge this. Then came the AI translation attempts. In 2018, a pair of researchers made headlines using an AI that had been trained to translate between languages using the universal translator approach. They theorized the script might be a cipher for an abbreviated form of Hebrew. The AI, after analysis, proposed a possible decoding key and spat out a tentative translation for the first few lines. The result? Phrases like, "She made recommendations to the priest, man of the house and me and people," and "It was empty, a fine-lined clay pot." The sentences were grammatically odd, semantically vague, and did not clearly connect to the adjacent illustrations of plants. The academic community was deeply skeptical. The method was questionable, the outcome unsatisfying. The AI had perhaps found a pattern, but not the pattern, if a pattern truly existed there to find. Other teams used network theory, mapping the relationships between characters and words as if they were nodes in a social web. This revealed a complex but organized architecture, further evidence of systematic construction. Yet the map led to no Rosetta Stone. The most sobering and fascinating results came from stylometric analysis. This technique, often used to determine the authorship of disputed texts like Shakespeare's plays, analyzes the fingerprint of an author's style: word choice, sentence length, rhythm. When applied to the Voynich, the analysis suggested something startling. The text's statistical properties were incredibly uniform across the entire manuscript. Too uniform. In most long texts by a single author, there are subtle variations, drifts in style. The Voynich shows almost none. This has led to a controversial but compelling theory: the meaningless but grammatical hypothesis. Proposed by some linguists and computer scientists, this theory argues that the Voynich text is a form of grammatical glossolalia, or a constructed pseudo-language. It was generated using a set of strict, synthetic grammatical rules, perhaps from a now-lost cipher device like a cipher disk or a set of tables, to produce text that looks and behaves like language, but carries no extrinsic meaning. The purpose? To create an impressive-looking but empty vessel. A beautiful book that appears to contain profound secrets, perhaps to be sold to a gullible wealthy patron, like Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, to whom it was later linked. The images, then, would be fantastical decorations to enhance the illusion. This is the Voynich as a Renaissance scam theory. It is elegant in its cynicism. It explains the perfect statistical properties generated by a rule-based system, the uniformity produced by a mechanical process, and the failure to decode because there's no message to decode. The two courier languages could simply be two different rule sets used by the forger. But this theory too has major flaws. The cost and effort involved are immense for a scam. The vellum, the pigments, the years of a skilled scribe's and painter's labor, all for a gamble on selling a fake to one king? Furthermore, the integration of text and image is too intimate. The text wraps around specific plant roots and nymphs' toes in a way that suggests a direct relationship, not random generation. A forger would likely have drawn the pictures first and filled the spaces with text afterward, leading to less organic integration. Soundscape evolves. The supercomputer hum is joined by the soft, rapid clicking of a mechanical cipher device. The sound of a metal disc with alphabets rotating against itself. This blends with the slower, more deliberate sound of a quill pen. We are hearing the clash of two possibilities: the mechanical generation of text versus the human act of meaningful writing. So we are left with a digital stalemate. The machines have told us what the text is like, but not what it is. They have confirmed its eerie, language-like structure, but have been unable to extract a single verifiable sentence. They have even raised the specter that its perfection might be the signature of a brilliant, empty artifice. This forces a profound and humbling realization. After a century of cryptanalysis and decades of computational brute force, the Voynich script retains its secrets not because we lack intelligence or technology, but because we may lack the context. We are trying to solve an equation where we don't know the variables. Is it language X and cipher Y? Or is it language Z now extinct? Or is it a flawless simulation of language, a philosophical forgery meant to question the very nature of meaning itself? The battle for the language of the Voynich is not over, but the front lines have shifted from decipherment to a more fundamental question. What kind of thing are we even trying to read? The siege engines of logic, statistics, and silicon have retreated, baffled. The script remains serene and unreadable in its vellum fortress. In this failure, however, we may have found the most important clue of all. The resistance of the Voynich script to every form of attack tells us something critical about its origin. It is not merely a locked door, it is a door that may lead to a room built in a geometry we cannot perceive. Let's consider the implications of our failure. If it is a cipher of a known language, it is a cipher of unimaginable sophistication for its time, one that defies frequency analysis, pattern recognition, and contextual guessing even with the help of the images. This would imply the existence of a lost Renaissance cryptographical genius far ahead of anyone recorded, who then used this genius not for state secrets or military plans, but solely to encode a book of weird plants and star charts. This seems incongruous. If it is a lost natural language, its isolation is total. No other sample, no inscription, no reference in any other text has ever been found. It would be a language that left only this single, lavish monument. A language spoken by whom? A tiny, incredibly secretive sect that poured its entire cultural output into one book? A lone survivor of a cataclysm, recording their world in a final, desperate act? While romantic, it strains historical probability. If it is a constructed language or pseudo-language, its creator was a sociolinguistic prodigy, intuitively or deliberately crafting a system that perfectly mimics the deep statistical and grammatical structures of human language, a feat not formally understood until the 20th century. The purpose then becomes the ultimate puzzle. Was it an artistic experiment? A philosophical statement on the nature of meaning? A template for a perfect language waiting for its lexicon to be filled? Each of these possibilities points away from the mundane and toward the extraordinary. The Voynich Manuscript is not a normal historical anomaly. It is an extreme outlier. Its text is the core of that extremeness. This realization brings us to the final and perhaps most respectful stance we can take, to accept that the Voynich may represent a closed system of knowledge. A system where the text and the images are two parts of a single, indissoluble code. You cannot read the text without understanding the images as its dictionary, and you cannot understand the images without the text as its commentary. They are meant to be learned together as a unified whole, likely from a teacher within the tradition that created it. The key to the Voynich then may not be a linguistic Rosetta Stone, but a methodological key, a way of thinking. a specific set of operations for meditating upon an image until it yields a textual meaning, and vice versa. This is how some esoteric traditions work. The text is not a direct description. It is an incantation or a formula that activates the meaning of the image for the initiated viewer. In this light, the centuries of failure are not a mark of our stupidity, but a measure of our distance from the manuscript's intellectual universe. We are archaeologists from a culture of discrete facts trying to excavate a temple from a culture of resonant symbols. We are cataloging the stones but missing the liturgy. So where does this leave us? With the script still unread, but with a new appreciation for its role. It is not a flaw in the manuscript. It is its definitive feature. The unreadable text is the sound of silence at the heart of the mystery. It is what transforms the book from a mere curious artifact into a timeless question mark. It forces us to project our own theories, our own desires for meaning onto its pages. In its resistance, it holds up a mirror to our own obsession with explanation and control. The final haunting possibility is that the text was meant to be read, but not by us. Not by anyone in the lineage of thought that led to modern science and historiography. It was meant for readers of a different cognitive lineage, one that diverged and died out, leaving this single fossilized thought capsule behind. As we prepare to move to the final chapter, the realm of grand unifying theories, we carry with us the sobering weight of the unreadable script. It is the immutable core of the Voynich mystery. Any theory that claims to solve the manuscript must first explain the script's perfect, defiant silence. It must explain not just what the book says, but why it chose to say it in a way that would become a permanent secret to the future it surely knew was coming. The language of no one may, in the end, be the most eloquent statement of all. A demonstration that some chambers of the human past are sealed not by time, but by a deliberate change in the very architecture of the mind. We have examined the physical proof, wandered the impossible garden, traced the starry hydraulics, and battered ourselves against the unyielding wall of its script. Now we arrive at the cliff's edge of understanding, where facts recede and theories expand to fill the void. This final chapter is not about finding the answer, for the Voynich has guarded it well, but about exploring the profound and often breathtaking landscapes of possibility that it has inspired. What if the truth is not a simple historical fact, but a crack in our perception of history itself? Let us begin with the theories that, however radical, still cling to the bedrock of terrestrial human history. The alchemical grimoire hypothesis. This is perhaps the most elegant historical fit. The manuscript is a practical, symbolic guide to the magnum opus, the great work of alchemy. The plants are not literal, but representations of the different stages of matter's transformation: nigredo, albedo, citronidas, rubedo. The nymphs in their tubes are the spiritual forces and chemical processes, distillation, circulation, coagulation, at play. The celestial maps are talismanic, indicating astrological timings for operations. The unreadable text is the language of the birds, lingua adamica, the secret tongue of alchemists, encoding precise laboratory instructions. Its purpose? To guide the initiate to the philosopher's stone, not through clear description, but through transformative meditation on its symbols. This theory explains the secrecy, the cost, and the integration of art and text beautifully. The Voynich, then, is the ultimate how-to manual for a spiritual and material transformation that its author believed was possible. The heretical women's knowledge hypothesis. Here, the manuscript is a dangerous artifact. It is a compendium of gynecology, midwifery, herbal abortifacients, and women's spiritual practices, encrypted to protect it from the Inquisition and the male-dominated medical establishment. The nymphs are literal women. The tubes and pools represent reproductive anatomy and therapeutic baths. The plants are herbs used in women's medicine. Their impossible forms a code to conceal their true identities. The script is a shorthand or constructed language developed within a network of wise women, nuns, or heretical sects like the Beguines. This theory gives powerful, tragic social context to the need for such an elaborate secret language and could explain why the knowledge was so thoroughly lost. Its bearers were silenced. The Lost Explorer's Sketchbook. Imagine a lone, early 15th century traveler, a merchant, a diplomat, a captive, who journeyed far beyond the mapped world. To the Americas, to a hidden valley in Asia, or to an isolated island ecosystem. There they saw a flora and fauna utterly alien to European eyes. They sketched what they saw, but without the taxonomic framework to understand it, their drawings became composites. A leaf from here, a root from there. The nymphs could be depictions of indigenous people in ritual baths or steam rooms. The script is their attempt to phonetically record an unknown language or their own private notes in a personal cipher. The book is the lone surviving record of a first contact that history forgot. These historical theories are compelling. They fit pieces of the puzzle. But they all stumble on the same rock, the perfection and isolation of the script. Why create or use a linguistic system so perfect and so unique that it dies with this one book? Soundscape shifts. The historical murmurs are joined by, then overtaken by, a new set of sounds. The electric crackle of a Tesla coil, the warp drive hum of science fiction, the shimmering, non-musical tones often associated with the otherworldly in film. This is where the theories leap from the pages of history into the realms of chronology, consciousness, and cosmos. When historical frameworks feel insufficient, the human mind seeks larger canvases. The Voynich Manuscript, in its stubborn uniqueness, invites us to paint on them. Let us entertain the more radical theories not as truth, but as thought experiments that reveal just how deeply this book disrupts our sense of the possible. Theory: The Time Traveler's Journal. What if the creator was not of the 15th century but a visitor to it? A traveler from our future, or a different timeline, stranded in the past, equipped with knowledge of biology, astronomy, and systems theory far beyond the era. With no way to share this knowledge directly without causing panic or being condemned, they encode it. The impossible plants are genetically engineered or from a future biosphere. The hydraulic systems are diagrams of advanced bioengineering or ecological management. The script is a personal, futuristic shorthand or a corrupted version of their own language. The book is a desperate attempt to preserve a crashing database of advanced science in the only durable medium available: parchment and ink. It is a message in a bottle thrown backwards in time. This explains the anachronistic clarity of the circulatory systems and the alien botany. The manuscript is a relic, not of a lost past, but of a lost future. Theory: the extraterrestrial artifact. The most famous fringe idea: the Voynich is not of this world. It is a piece of non-human intelligence. Perhaps it was left behind as a tutorial, a gift, or a beacon. The plants are flora from another planet. The nymphs are schematic representations of the alien beings themselves or of biological processes in their ecosystem. The celestial maps are star charts for navigation, pointing to a home system. The text is, of course, unreadable. It's alien. It obeys universal linguistic statistics because all complex communication might follow similar rules, but its semantics are rooted in a biology and physics we don't share. This theory is ultimately a cul-de-sac of thought, as it explains everything by explaining nothing. But it persists because it directly addresses the core sensation the manuscript evokes: otherness. Theory: the psychotropic vision. Here the elsewhere is not in space or time but in the mind. The manuscript is a meticulously recorded atlas of the psychedelic experience. Imagine a monk, an alchemist, or a mystic consuming potent entheogens: ergot, psilocybin, datura, or some lost compound. In prolonged, ritualized states, they journeyed into a hyperreal, symbolic interior landscape. The vibrating, composite plants are the entoptic phenomena and synesthetic merging of forms experienced. The nymphs and tubes are the felt sense of energy flows and bodily dissolution common in such states. The celestial rosettes are maps of the luminous, geometric tunnels of breakthrough visions. The text is an attempt to transcribe the language of the plants, or the divine, a glossolalia felt as profoundly meaningful but inherently untranslatable. The book is then a shamanic field guide, meant to be read in conjunction with the ritual use of the very plants it may secretly describe. Its purpose is initiatory, to prepare the mind for the journey and to map the terra incognita of consciousness. Theory: the hoax that became real. A more meta and psychological theory. The Voynich began as a Renaissance forgery, perhaps by Edward Kelly or John Dee or an unknown con artist, intended to defraud Emperor Rudolph II. But in its creation, something happened. The forger, deeply researching archaic symbols, herbal lore, and cipher techniques, slipped into a kind of creative trance. The project took on a life of its own, becoming less a deception and more an authentic, unconscious outpouring of archetypal imagery from the collective unconscious. The script emerged not as a clever cipher, but as a form of automatic writing. The book is therefore a genuine psychic artifact, but its meaning is not literal. It is symbolic and psychological. It is a mirror reflecting the deep, strange layers of the human psyche, mistaken for centuries as a map of the external world. Each of these theories casts the Voynich in a different light, as a relic, a message, a map, or a mirror. They are not mutually exclusive. An alchemical text is a map of consciousness. A shamanic journal is a record of an elsewhere. The power of the Voynich is its ability to be a Rorschach test for epistemology. How you try to solve it reveals what you believe about history, consciousness, and reality itself. Soundscape becomes a collage of these theories. The bubbling of an alchemical retort, the hum of a UFO engine, the echoey distortion of a mind under entheogens, the scratch of a quill in a forger's studio. These sounds do not clash, but weave together into a strange, coherent dissonance. The sound of the manuscript, own multifaceted mystery. Our journey through the gardens, star charts, and linguistic labyrinths of the Voynich Manuscript must now draw to a close. But before we leave, we must visit its present-day home and consider the final human truth it imparts. Today, the Voynich Manuscript rests in a climate-controlled vault in the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University, catalogued as MS-408. It is no longer in a private collector's hands, subject to rumor and speculation. It is an object of academic stewardship, available for digital scrutiny by anyone in the world. High-resolution scans of every page are online, and yet, its essential mystery is undiminished. If anything, its accessibility has multiplied the theories, not resolved them. This is the modern paradox of the Voynich. It is more exposed and more hidden than ever. We can zoom in on every fiber of its vellum, analyze its pigment spectra, and run its text through the most powerful algorithms on the planet. We know it intimately, and we understand it not at all. There is a poignant history of those who tried too hard to understand. Stories, perhaps apocryphal, tell of researchers who spent decades on the manuscript only to succumb to obsession, their minds fraying at the edges of an unsolvable puzzle. The Voynich has been called a cognitive black hole. It promises meaning with one hand, through its beautiful, structured language-like text, and withdraws it with the other. This dance of promise and denial can be maddening. It is a siren's call to the rational mind, luring it onto the rocks of obsession. But there is another way to see it. The Voynich Manuscript's ultimate lesson may not be about solving, but about contemplating the limits of solution. It is a permanent monument to the gap between information and understanding. We have all the data. We lack the context, the key, the living tradition that would animate it. It is a fossilized thought from a mind that worked differently. So, what are we left with after all the theories, from the alchemical to the alien? We are left with an artifact of pure question. It does not answer to our disciplines. It shrugs off our categories. It is a medieval book that refuses to behave like one. In a world increasingly convinced it can know and measure everything, the Voynich stands as an elegant 600-year-old rebuttal. It is a whisper from the past that says, "Some things are not for you to know." This is not a discouraging message. It is a liberating one. The Voynich frees us from the need for a single tidy answer. It invites us to wonder, to speculate, to project, and to marvel at the sheer creativity of the human, or perhaps non-human, spirit that could produce such a thing. Its value may not be in a secret formula it contains, but in the conversation it perpetuates. A conversation across centuries about the nature of knowledge, secrecy, art, and the boundaries of our world. Perhaps the final theory is that the manuscript's true purpose is to be a mystery, to function as a perpetual engine for curiosity. In that, it has succeeded spectacularly. It has outlived empires, survived wars, transitioned from parchment to pixels, and continues to captivate us. It is more alive as a question than it ever could have been as a mere answered riddle. As we take our leave, imagine the book in its silent Yale vault. The lights are low. The air is still. The strange plants do not grow, the nymphs do not bathe, the stars in their wheels do not turn. And yet, in the minds of everyone who has ever encountered it, they are vibrantly, troublingly alive. The Voynich Manuscript is not on the shelf, it is in the synapse. It exists less as a physical object and more as a shared mental space. A cathedral of curiosity we have all built together, brick by theoretical brick, over centuries. Its final message may be the simplest and most profound. Wonder is its own reward. Begin a slow 7-minute final fade. The ambient sound returns to the very first one we heard. The soft creak of a bookshelf, the whisper of a curtain. It is the sound of Wilfred Voynich's discovery in 1912. But now, layered underneath, we hear all the sounds of our journey. The brush on parchment, the bubble of alien sap, the hum of celestial spheres, the flow of water in tubes, the clack of typewriters, the whir of servers, the chorus of theorizing voices. This rich tapestry of sound, the entire history of the mystery, swells gently, not in chaos, but in a kind of harmony. It is the sound of the quest itself. Then one by one these sounds begin to drop away. The theories fade, the machines power down, the stars dim. We are left with the original library sounds. Then those too fade. Finally, all that remains is the soft, rhythmic sound of a turning page. Not a frantic search, but a calm, endless turning. The page turns once, twice, and then the sound stops. The final sound is the gentle, definitive click of a book's cover being closed. Silence.